Welcome to the SPKFeat trading channel. Study the past, know the future, each trade.
I think most people feel really lonely when you want something that doesn't currently exist. And so some people call that dreams, some people call that goals, whatever it is. You're trying to pull something from your mind into reality and you want it done a certain way. And if it's not done that way, it's not what you imagined. And so people on the outside will throw stones and call you names that they think will change your behavior and get you to stop. And the more I have been the person trying to pull things into reality, the more I've tried to weather and build kind of defenses against those things so that when those stones get hurled at you by being called a control freak or by saying you micromanage things or that you have incredibly high standards, the answer is yes, because I want it done right the first time. Because either way, if you have enough will, it's going to get done the way that I want it to get done regardless. And it'll be less painful if we just do it right the first time, because we will still have to do it. And you may have to do it 3 or 4 more times, but eventually you will just succumb to the fact that we're going to do it this way. And I think all of the great things that have happened for humanity have been from one man or woman who had an idea and just wouldn't let people shake it from them. If you knew what you were doing, then you would be stagnating because you'd be doing nothing new. And so if you're going to do something new, then that is what would be the catalyst for growth. And so you can't want to grow and also want to know everything you're doing at the same time. It's like the two beliefs contradict one another. And so I think that's a lot of the discontent that people suffer from is they want 2 things that are polar opposites. They want the really strong character. They want the easy life. Like one is the price of the other. You have a hard life to have great character. You have an easy life. You have shitty character. Everything came easy. You want to grow. You don't want hardship. Hardship creates growth. And so they want both, and you can't. Like it's wanting the Jordans without paying the price. And the price isn't bad. It's just the price is what it is. And so it's just, do you want the Jordans or not? And if you do, then don't lament the price tag. Pay the price tag and be happy you have the Jordans. And if you don't want the Jordans, then don't buy them.
The standard of right isn't actually that insane when you think about it. It's just right. It's just done without error. And I guess that the margin that some people consider to be right and other people consider to be right just changes.
I'm trying to think of a really good example for this, but like the level of detail, I mean, it's the difference between a book that gets 10 or 100 5-star reviews and a book that gets 100,000 5-star reviews. And everyone wants a silver bullet, but most of the things that make great products is 100 golden BBs. And so that's one of the things we have is there's no silver bullets, only hundreds of golden BBs. There's just hundreds of tiny little improvements. It's like, how can we look at the can? How can we improve the way it ships? What about the weight? What about the color scheme? How does it sit on the shelves? How are people going to look at it in this market versus this market? Or like, how does this name appear on hats and on shirts and on sites? And what's the RGB, whatever the color scope is here versus there? And it's just 1,000 details that someone who does not care will not put the work to look into because they're trying to check a box rather than to make something that people will love. Basically, that the best art is art where the artist makes it for themselves. And where you see commercial work is where a bunch of people are trying to make something for an audience. And so they're trying to like rinse and recycle stuff that actually solves no one's problems because no one is actually the audience. Whereas when you make it for yourself, there's thousands of people just like you who will have the same depth of understanding of it, but it feels selfish in the moment to make something for yourself. But when you make it for yourself, you actually make it for everyone.
Being concerned about being seen as someone who has too high standards is something that for quite a while I felt ashamed about.
Yeah.
Because you feel like a bother. You feel like you're being unnecessarily, it's not even detail oriented, it's picky.
Cumbersome, yeah.
Yes. Laborious.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized probably last year, it took me until last year to realize that not succumbing to stopping doing that is probably one of the only reasons why I've had any success.
I mean, I think for anyone who's listening, if you have that, I would consider it a gift. it makes sense for the majority of people to be opposed to that.
There is this pull, I think, from people who don't have high standards to people who do have high standards to drag them back. It's this like moving back toward the mean is killing the only competitive advantage that you had.
The whole like, don't be a perfectionist, like like it's just another word for procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think that's complete bullshit. I think that's
my quote.
Is it?
Perfectionism is procrastination masquerading as quality control.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So then I'm gonna put a footnote on it that I think will add context, which is that most people who claim to be perfectionists are not perfectionists. They're actually procrastinating because they're not doing anything.
Correct.
And so it just is a socially acceptable label, because the real perfectionists feel this sickness where they like want to itch their skin off until the thing's done, but they are trying to get it done. Whereas the perfectionist or the procrastinator uses that to say, like, I'm not sure, I'm just getting it right. But like the person who's an actual perfectionist, one wants to finish and is working every hour of every day on the thing and seeing progress towards it. Because if you don't know how your thing is getting better, you're not a perfectionist, you're just ignorant.
Here's how to get older without getting better. Keep relearning the same lesson. If you keep making the same mistake over and over, the mistake isn't the problem. You are.
So I define learning by same condition, new behavior. And so when you go to a video game and you battle through the level and you battle the boss, if you keep doing the same thing to the boss and you keep losing, then you have not learned, because you have the same condition and the same behavior. And so I often say that, like, for anyone who's listening to this podcast, if the goal is to get better and you're like, man, I really want to learn something from this podcast. If you listen to this podcast and then you're in the same exact conditions as you were before, and then you do not change your behavior, you learned nothing. And so using that definition has at least allowed me to change my behavior faster, which then goes into rate of learning, which I define as intelligence. And so a lot of people are like, man, he's so smart, but he just doesn't. It's like, well, then if he doesn't change his behavior and he's in the same conditions, he's a dummy. He's not that smart.
Reminder that if you want to be exceptional, you're going to be different from everyone else. That's what makes you exceptional. You can't fit in and also be exceptional. Both have discomfort. When you fit in, you have internal conflict because you're not being 100% you. When you're exceptional, you have external conflict because everyone sees you as different. Pick one. When your friends start to say, you've changed, remember it's because they don't know how to say, you've grown.
I call it the Rocky cutscene, and almost every successful person that I have ever encountered has gone through not a month or a year, but many years of doing work without reward, where they have to do things that other people find boring, and they have to sacrifice things that everyone finds interesting, that most people want to do during that entire season of their life. And they basically sacrifice a season of other things that they would prefer to do stuff that they would not prefer to do because of the one thing they want most. And that's the Rocky cutscene. And instead of lasting 5 minutes, it just usually lasts 5 or 10 years.
You're going to lose sleep. You'll doubt whether it'll work. You'll stress to make ends meet. You won't finish your to-do list. You'll wonder whether you made the right call and have no way to know for years. This is what hard feels like, and that's okay. Everything worth doing is hard, and the more worth doing it is, the harder it is. The greater the payoff, the greater the hardship. If it's hard, good. It means no one else will do it. More for you.
I think a lot of entrepreneurship and even personal growth is training yourself on how you respond to hard. Because in the early days, hard was, ooh, stop. This isn't good. I should, this is a warning sign. This is a red flag. I should slow down, or I should stop, I should pivot. But the more I think about it as a competitive landscape, as I'm clear on what this path is supposed to look like, and these rocks and these dragons are things that I'm going to have to slay along the way to get the princess or get the treasure, I get happier about the harder it is because I know that no one else will follow.
It's a selection effect.
And I think if you can shift from this is hard to no one else will be able to do this, then it flips from being this thing that you're like, oh, poor me, to, oh, poor everyone else who's going to have to fucking try.
Yeah.
And I think that is so much more motivating as a frame for the exact same circumstance.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was thinking a lot about the lonely chapter that we talked about the last time. That was the best, most powerful idea I think that we came up with. And if you see there basically being no shortcuts toward getting the thing that you want, there are ways to be more and less efficient. And there are ways to do things with more and less of a positive disposition, which can actually make the journey feel an awful lot easier. But ultimately, if you assume that largely everyone needs to go through the same challenges that you're going through, every single difficult thing that you do is kind of like a massive wall that you need to get over. And you go, wow, fuck, I'm so glad that I've got over that wall. And think about how many people are going to be selected out. It's like the Hunger Games, you know? Think about how many other people are going to fall at that wall there.
People only root for people who don't need it. Like the amount of times when I was on my lonely path where I was too different from the friends that I had, but not successful enough to be friends with the people that I wanted to be friends with. That's when you want people to root for you. That's when you want people to support you. Once you've already won, people are like, he's amazing, he's so good. But like, that's the time when you need it the least. And so you always have to be the person who roots for you before everyone else does. And it's usually a single clap in the auditorium for a very long period of time. It is a slow clap that's just you rooting for you. And that visual, I think, is one that you can kind of take because it is. People struggle to do things alone. And the path of the exceptional person is one of an exception, which means that you are not with other people. And rather than fighting that or bemoaning it, see it as an indicator that you're on the right path. Because if everyone else were cheering you on, then it means you're not in the right place, because it means you're just like everyone else, and that's not where you want to be.
It's an interesting paradox that the energy it requires to start doing something is way more than the energy required to continue doing the thing. And that the beginning of doing anything results in the lowest amount of reward, both internal and external, than when you've been doing it for ages. So I think about this a lot with the show, that there was this stat that Spotify told us 85% of the listeners of this show found us in 2023.
Right. And
I thought at the end of 2022, remembering at that point, I'd been on Rogan, we were at like 650K. We've got, we've been doing 550, 600 episodes deep.
Yeah.
Like I've got it. I've done the thing. Like this is me doing, if this isn't fucking doing the thing, I've moved to Austin, Texas. I've got an O1 visa. I've got like all the rest of this stuff. And one of the things that you need to ensure, I've had this idea about protect your passion at all costs, because if you begin to hate the thing that you do, you negatively change your trajectory. And that means that at the time when you can benefit the most by every single unit of work, which is the later that you go, presuming that you continue to hit that upward trajectory, if you've completely killed any passion or desire to do the work in the early stages because you've not protected it appropriately, that can be by focusing on the wrong things, by not rewarding yourself, by not building it with people that care about you, by just not celebrating when you hit milestones, all of the things that actually help to keep you going.
Being a character.
By the time you get to the stage where each unit of effort allows you to gain 1,000 or 1,000,000 of each of the things that it would have done at the very beginning, you've inverted the passion equation. It takes way more energy to start a thing than to continue doing a thing. And yet in the beginning, the rewards are way lower than they are at the end. But if you don't protect your passion, your motivation is at its lowest when you are at your highest amount of efficiency in terms of returning your time put in.
I think a hopeful message that anyone can think about who's in that hard period or in that start period is that it won't get harder. Like, this is the hardest part. And so if you can just make it through this, everything else is downhill. It's not that the things that the dragons are going to slay aren't going to get bigger. They are. but you become so much more equipped to slay them back. And you have so many more allies. You have people in the stands cheering for you. You have the audience. You have all of these other things that are behind you. But in the beginning, it's just you with a stick against a bear. And arguably that fight is a harder fight to win than beating a dragon when you have a nuclear bomb and 6 nations behind you. And so it's not even like the size of the hardship. It's just also the resources and how few of them you have, and how so much of the beginning is literally burning the one thing you have, which is time, because you have no leverage. You don't have the money to pay other people to help you. You don't have the resources to go like get someone no one can learn it for you. It's like there's a lot of the things that we care about a lot. Like no one can work out for you. It doesn't matter how much money you have. No one can learn skills for you. And so in the early days, like it feels so painful because you're like, you look around to see who can help you. And then you're like, fuck, it's me again. And I think getting comfortable with the idea that each of these things, kind of like Slumdog Millionaire, if you've seen that movie where I'll give you the TLDR. He goes through his entire life of randomness and he gets on a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire version in India. And it has 12 questions to make $1 million. And from only 12 random experiences in his life that seemed meaningless at the time, was he able to answer all of the questions and then ultimately win. The skills that you develop along the way, like Steve Jobs learning calligraphy that then became Apple fonts that, transformed how we type. Those early days, that little trench winning in the weeds, oftentimes gives you these huge advantages later on because you have more context than anyone else. And so rather than lament them and hate the fact that you're going through it, remembering that these will be arrows that you put in the quiver that you're going to be using to slay the future bigger dragons. Expecting it to be easy is what makes it much harder than it ever is.